I'd like to depart from the topic of paper basketry. Let me share the idea of creating flowers based on natural materials, decorated with paints. I've been amazed with the wonders created of Asian plants' leaves, like palms and others. I'm not sure of the plants' names. The beauty of the compositions has inspired me so much that my imagination and desire to try and create flowers of natural materials too have made me look around in search of natural materials available. We live next to the big river, Dnieper, and there's lots of bulrush growing nearby. I've been watching all of this bulrush for quite a while, trying to make use of it. Last year I tried and made roses of it. This time I've decided to experiment with woven flowers like this. So we don't depart from weaving, only from paper weaving. As you can see, the vase is made of paper, but we are going to discuss it later. Let's talk of the flowers so far. The flower consists of petals, 6, 7, sometimes 5, depending on the flower size. In order to create a petal like this, I take a small bulrush sleeve. Well, you can create big flowers of big leaves too. These were my first experiments, and they do have the right to exist too. However, they require a big vase. So, after some experiments, I've chosen such compact floral compositions. I use small leaves for them. Besides, I have to split them into narrow stripes. The stripes are shorter by the edge and longer in the center. As a result, I've got to get 7 stripes. At first I tried my best splitting a leaf into 7 stripes from the very beginning. Then I realized that my main task is splitting it into more or less smooth stripes, otherwise weaving won't be neat. As for the extra stripes, you can just nip them off, anyway they are too short. Let's check how many stripes I've got. The 8th is the shortest one, let's get rid of it. Now we've got 7 stripes, let's start interweaving them. Take the extreme one and lead it in front of the neighboring stripe, behind the one, in front of one, behind the following one, just a normal technique of interweaving. Take the next one and work in the same very way, onto one stripe, under the next one. Every time you take the extreme stripe and lead it in front of the neighboring one at first. Since I've got 7 stripes, when I start interweaving from left to right, I'm supposed to repeat the same very steps. I've got it. Now turn around and start interweaving left to right in the same very way. In front of one, behind the following. If I had an even number of stripes, 8 for example, then, in order to get weaving smooth, I'd have to start interweaving behind the neighboring stripe, in front of the following one, and so on. Well, actually you can tell it yourself experimentally. In my case I lead the stripe, in front of one, behind the following one, and so on. I've also tried working with some other kinds of grass. I'm not sure how to call them. I've seen them recently grow nearby. It is a kind of thornchus or sow thistle. It is more rigid, but afterwards I've got back to bulrush anyway. even though the leaves seem loose enough. Anyway, I like small flowers made of them. So I made a circle of interweaving right to left and then a cycle left to right. It is where I face a challenge. It's high time to unite these short stripes and continue working with 5 stripes instead of 7. One, two, three, 4. As for these 3, 1 long stripe and 2 short ones, let's unite them into a single stripe. And continue working with 5 stripes, 1/5 of which is a bunch of stripes. This way you can continue weaving for a while till they get over. Where's my bunch of stripes? Here it is. By this moment all the stripes become short. Well, I mean continue weaving as long as the stripes are long enough. When I see they are getting too short, I usually take the strongest one and wrap the whole bunch of stripes with it. Break the tail off and lead it under the extreme layer or 2, and that's quite enough to fasten. They are not going to unweave if you press it well with your fingers, because the material is pliable enough. So I've got a petal like this as a result. If your bulrush leaves are large enough, then you can make 2 petals of a single leaf. Let me add a few words about the material. I've tried my best to select the leaves of more or less equal size. They get dry very fast and roll into a tube. I've made use of this quality in order to get a decoration like this. If something goes wrong, for example, you break a stripe or fail to get smooth, equal stripes, don't worry, you can put the torn leaf aside. The next day you get these narrow stripes rolled into thin tubes. They get fastened the way you leave them. That's why I leave them on a flat surface in order to get them shaped like this. As a result, you get an additional decoration for your bouquet of flowers. So, to prevent bulrush leaves from over-drying, I put them into a poly bag right after I've picked them. This allows me using them 2 or even 3 days after. If they get dry, you can water them. Well, anyway, it's better using natural material right away. It is not meant for long keeping. At first it used to disappoint me. However, after I watched the way bulrush behaves, for example the way the last year flowers look, I've decided to interfere with the natural process. Well, it's subject to discussion whether what I've done is worth doing or not. Anyway, I'd like to be able to create such flowers not only in the season of bulrush growing, but all the year round. That's why I made such work pieces woven on the second or the third day after I've picked the bulrush. if you paint the woven workpieces, you can keep them for a longer time. That's why I made quite a lot of them, to be able to make my family and friends happy with such floral composition during winter and spring till the next harvest of bulrush is ready. One more point. I've tried working with fresh green leaves of the bulrush that has grown where the old bulrush got burnt. The leaves look fresh and nice, however, from my experience I've realized that rigid autumn leaves are much more convenient for weaving. The fresh one breaks easily like grass does. These old ones are rigid and fibrous enough already and easy to work with. A few words about durability of compositions. Take a look, please. I made these bouquets last year. This one is only varnished. It is the way they used to be. This is the way they become. Well, the leaves haven't lost their color completely, but they faded considerably. That's why I've decided I'd better paint them. These ones were made last year as well. However, they were covered with pearl paints I'm going to show you, and they are still as bright as they used to be. This is the last bouquet left. Now, as for the paints, I've tried different ones as well. Most of all, I like the result of using pearl paints. Since the range of pearl colors is not rich enough, I take a golden pearl paint, for example. Well, I've tried different mixtures of paints without the pearl one. They don't cover a leaf completely, the paints run off and make spots of green visible. That's why I take golden paint, add some colorant over a close tint of color. Well, it's up to you which colors to mix, and cover the petal with the mixture I've got. I don't know why, but these very pearl paints, as I know from my experience, cover the item smoothly and don't run off. After a while I'll get a petal like this. Let me add a few words about my failures. For some reason I believed an automotive spray paint would be quite appropriate for the case. However, it has proven quite the opposite. After the petal has gotten dry and I've tried twisting it, take a look what I've got. It has started shelling off. That has made me reject the automotive paint. Well, actually it's not a big pity, because the paint is rather expensive and stinky, so I like the option I've told you about from the very beginning much better. No specific smell, you don't need much paint, and you can see the result with your own eyes. You can experiment with different combinations of color. Here, for example, I resulted with dark maroon, a bit too gloomy, so I've decided to make it brighter by patinating with some gold. The same concerns this item. I've got too rich dark purple color, so I refreshed it a bit with some silver paint, which has made the petal somewhat brighter and lighter. So it is where you can apply your imagination. After I've woven and painted quite a lot of stripes, I usually sort them out, in order to get petals of a more or less equal length. So here I've got some stripes of a more or less equal length. I see that a single stripe like this is quite sufficient for creating 2 petals. At first I've tried rolling 2 petals at a time. However, experimentally I've concluded that it is better to roll each of the petals individually. This way I get a neater flower. In my work I use a so-called florist tape. There's nothing difficult about it. In order to minimize the expense of tape and to avoid a too thick base, I don't use much tape for rolling. I add some glue to fasten it stronger. The first petal is ready. In the same way I create a second one. If you've painted the stripes long ago, you'd better soften them like this, in the same way as you do with the tubes. Only after that you may start shaping them. Otherwise they can get cracked due to exhaustive dryness. The stripe has become dry long ago, and still it is rather flexible so far, even though it was painted about a fortnight ago. This way I have to create 6, in my case, petals. The next step is shaping the very flower. The center may be different, but in most cases it is of a contrast color in order to show up. At first I didn't plan any specific center. I believed these split tails could stand for a flower center. However, then I realized that the center inserted will make a flower much more nice looking. At least I like it much more this way. That's why I take a stripe of a contrast color and start rolling it. You can either roll it in a normal way or create a rose-like center, for example, like I've done here. If you happen to remember, in order to create a rose you have to turn the stripe from time to time. Both options are possible, but this time I feel like rolling it in a normal way. Well, it has cracked a bit, but I've started rolling and unrolling it a few times, so it's no wonder. And stick the first petal to the center. Fasten it. Got it. Join the next one. It is where you have to be very careful, because the way you fasten it will affect the way the flower is going to look. Due to this stage of rolling, I'm not quite satisfied with all the flowers I've made. So please be very careful, take notice of where the petals are directed, because afterwards it will be too difficult to recover it. Got it? One more. Fasten it, and the last one. Well, it seems there's one more petal missing. Even if I place it here in the middle, it will be kind of bulgish. So I've got to make one more petal, or even 2. You see, it becomes evident what improvements to introduce in the process. Let's try and make a leaf like this. take a bulrush leaf, break off all the needless stripes and leave only the 2 stripes in the middle of a more or less equal length. Then I fold the first one, make a small loop, wrap it a couple of times with the second one, lead it through a loop and tighten. Now take the second loop. Well, I believe all of you have tried making love beads. Even if you haven't, now you have a good chance to. In order to get big leaves, I've used the grass I've told you about, a kind of sow thistle. But actually you can experiment and try using whatever grows in your area. Just look around. Well, this technique requires considerable expense of material, so the longer your grass is, the longer the flower leaf will be. It is rather difficult to make big leaves of bulrush. Well, let's try lead it through once again. That's all. Now lead the tail through, tighten. In order to fasten it, lead it through the last loop once again. As a rule, it is easy to lead through. Tighten, press. I'm going to cut it after painting. As a result, I get a leaf like this. Especially I like the way it looks from this side, such a nice looking braid. I paint these leaves in the same very way. These ones have been made of sow thistle, that's why they look a bit different, but the principle and the pattern is just the same. Just the stripes were thinner and longer. I paint them in the same very way. Afterwards, while shaping a flower, I just tie the leaves to the stem at some regular intervals. It's up to you to decide how to shape your flower. If you need long stems, in order to be able to put the flowers into tall vases, it is also possible. I propose you to cut off some bulrush stems while preparing the material. I use them sometimes in the very tall flowers by just tying them to the stem from the very beginning. Since in my case I'm designing short compositions, I'm not using the bulrush stems this time. So I've got such a nice looking composition. To my mind it could be a fine gift. But the best thing about a present like this is its durability. And of course what is also nice is that it's made of natural material, which appeals to me a lot.